Now, anxious parents and students race against time to get into senior high schools as midnight deadline approaches.
Meanwhile, the future of 20 students from the Pensworth Preparatory School hangs in the balance as their BEC results are still being withheld on suspicion of examination malpractice.
And the lack of health post in Old Fadama is forcing some residents to smoke weed to stay fit or resort to some self-medication. That comes up in Timeline.
Also tonight, mother of quadruplets to receive help from social welfare after GH1 News shared her financial inability to cater for the 4 kids. We'll share that good news with you on tonight's edition. You're welcome to News Tonight. Here's our first story. The fact sheet of the 2017 Universal Periodic Review, UPR, on human rights issues has recommended that Ghana should establish an independent police complaint commission to deal with police brutalities. The report also tasked government to introduce an alternative sentencing policy and the decriminalization of petty offences. The 2017 Universal Periodic Review on Human Rights Issues has identified the lack of awareness about legal rights, long delays in court proceedings, woeful representation of lawyers, among others, as some challenges impeding the delivery of justice in the country. The report also indicated that is an average of 3 attorneys for each regional office, with a total of 14 attorneys serving the nation's populace, a situation described as unfortunate. Danish ambassador to Ghana, Tove Denbo, expressed worry about the extreme levels of overcrowding at the country's prisons and called on government to address the trend.
The prisons are overcrowded. There are prisoners on remand who should not even be there. Their cases have not been investigated properly. Also that they have not seen a judge. This is one of the areas where Denmark is working with access to justice to decongest prisoners' conditions. But I think there are some structural reforms necessary. It's necessary and important for Ghana to look at the legal framework to see if it's possible to avoid that so many people goes to prison who should not even be there.
She also expressed concern about the human rights abuses at the country's prisons.
One of the very specific things that could be done was to have courtrooms close to the prisons, which would facilitate the process of having remand prisoners seeing a judge very soon after the arrest. So that their cases can be heard. Proper investigation by the police is another very important aspect, and as I just said, I think there is a need also to look at the legal framework and look at options such as using community service, for instance, parole, other initiatives.
Statistics from the prison service indicates that as of August 2017, the number of remand prisoners at the country's prisons stood at 1,799, representing a 13.2% increase, whilst convicted prisoners stood at 11,741, representing an 88.71% increase. The Nsawam prisons, which was built to house 815 prisoners, currently houses over 3,266 prisoners. The Kumasi prisons also houses over 1,782 prisoners from its intended capacity of 416.
Now, the Media Foundation for West Africa and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, has launched a grant to facilitate the work of journalists working on quality and impactful stories that revolve around the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the grant package ranges from 100 Ghana cedis to 1,500 Ghana cedis and is open for application by all journalists who work with recognized media institutions.
The grant is an initiative of the Media Foundation for West Africa and the United Nations Development Programme to facilitate the work of journalists reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals. The 100 to 1,500 cedi grant is open to all journalists in recognized media houses from September 1 to October 8, 2017. Interested journalists are to download an application form from the Media Foundation for West Africa's website www.mfwa.org. As part of the process, applicants are expected to submit a synopsis of their intended story idea and a budget for onward review and approval by the committee. Addressing the press launch, the executive director of the Media Foundation for West Africa urged the media to seize the opportunity to highlight the SDGs in their reportage. This, he said, will attract government's attention to the development lapses in the country for redress.
We know that sometimes you have challenges in terms of moving from here to a particular community to gather information. And that is why we are going to, from today, be making some little grants available to support you in your investigations, in your research, to be able to come up with stories that would impact the lives of people, stories that would get the government to do what has to be done. And at the end of the day, we thought that it's also important, and again, with the support of UNDP and UNESCO, we have decided that it's important to reward those who would go the extra mile to do stories that really stand out.
A communications analyst with the UNDP also called on government to take advantage of the Sustainable Development Goals and streamline it into 40 years development plan.
We also have the 40-year development plan, which is still ongoing. So it is anticipated that Ghana will take advantage of the SDGs and our commitment to the SDGs to mainstream that also in the 40-year development plan. Again, it is everyone's business, as was said earlier. What that means is that as private citizens, as journalists, there are some super easy things we can be doing every day to make sure that we are supporting the SDGs. The SDGs are not just for government, not just for the UN to coordinate.
The chairperson for the Editors Forum Ghana also called on government to prioritize the SDGs to spread development across the country. This, she said, will purge Ghana of its current position as one of the dirtiest countries in the world.
How on earth did Ghana find herself cited in that league of shame of the world's dirtiest countries? A country where, by tradition, even in villages, women get up at the crack of dawn to sweep their compounds and surroundings. Worse, the revelation is that in so many places, including parts of the national capital, open defecation is the norm.
Meanwhile, the Media Foundation for West Africa is calling on all journalists who have done impactful stories on the SDGs to log on to www.mfwa.org and follow the modalities to submit their stories for its upcoming award on October 28, 2017. Interested journalists can submit a maximum of 3 stories for the award. The overall winner will be awarded 10,000 cedis, a certificate and a plaque, while the first and second runners-up will be rewarded with 6,000 and 3,000 cedis plus a certificate and a plaque respectively.
Now, the Greater Accra Regional Manager of the Public Utilities and Regulatory Commission is calling on government to reconstitute a new board for the commission, or else it will hit the streets in massive protests. The union locked up the offices of the commission to disallow work until their demand is met. Now, this was replicated in all their regional offices. They also want the presidency to make public the outcome of the investigations into allegations of malfeasance leveled against the Executive Secretary and the PRO.
The action followed a resolution reached by executive members of the Workers' Union after a meeting late Wednesday, September 6, 2017. According to Alhaji Jabaru Abukari, the current board is unconstitutional and incompetent as they can no longer take technical decisions for the commission.
We've never in our lifetime experienced such an incompetent board before. They came to just destroy and roll back the gains of the commission.
The executive secretary, Samuel Sapong, was alleged to have transferred over 400,000 cedis into his personal account, while public relations officer Nanaya Jantua is also reported to have spent over 100,000 cedis on 350 Christmas hampers in 2012. At least some 20 staff of the commission have been interrogated by the Bureau of National Investigations, including 2 top management members. Following the publication, Nanaya Jantua, in a memo to the executive secretary, tendered in her resignation from the commission. Months after the investigations into the allegation was concluded, report submitted to the chief of staff, Akosia Fremau Pare, the staff say they are yet to hear any decisive action from the government, while the embattled executive secretary stays at post. Alhaji Jabaru Abukari is the Greater Accra Regional Chairman of the PURC.
Most of our members were invited. They went to the BNI. They gave their side of the story. The BNI at a point detained the executive secretary and Nanaya Jantua because they felt that at a point they needed to assist them in further investigations, which they've in a way concluded, and they have sent their reports to the executive to the chief of staff. Almost 2 months, we've not heard anything. PURC is we have been diplomatic. That's the reason why all this thing has dragged for long.
Now, the Social Welfare Department says it is ready to take up the case of Rebecca Adamino, the mother of quadruplets who struggled with infertility for 15 years until she was blessed with 4 children at the age of 42. Now, the intervention follows GH1 News story, which highlighted the struggles that she goes through in catering for the children.
I took loan before I gave birth, and our system, when you took anything, you have to finish that one before you come for the new one. If you don't finish and you are pride, they will not give you because we are many.
Meet Rebecca Adamino, mother of quadruplets. Until the birth of these children, she was one of the thousands of women battling infertility. She was shamed and called barren after her first marriage lasted 8 years with no childbirth. For 15 years, she kept jumping from one herbalist to the other in search of a solution.
Their school fees, their feeding fee, their transportation, what they will eat money, and the snack. I provide all. So now, to be frank, I'm in hardship.
Rebecca Adamino's story has touched many hearts, and she is on the path of getting assistance for her quadruplets. Director of the Social Welfare Department, Phyllis Edem Senior, says her office will take up the case.
We can intervene by listening to her. Maybe sometimes you even have the resources around you don't know. Your husband's family, are they there? Are they aware of your predicaments? Sometimes your husband's family even thought that when he died, you took every property. Maybe he wasn't even having anything. So we will start from that angle. She can come here, but we have social welfare in all the districts and the sub-metros. So she can start from that place, but if she wants to, she can come directly to me. If I think I want to refer it to any district that is capable, I will do. But if it falls directly within our domain here too, we will do it. So she should come and inform us about the problem.
The Social Welfare Department appears to be constrained with limited financial support from government, and this affects the smooth operations of the department. But the director says she would seek other interventions, including liaising with non-governmental organizations to assist Rebecca and her quadruplets.
Because we register them, and we know them, and we know their objectives. So when we are faced with problems like this, we call them, we talk to them about the problem and see what they can do to assist. Then the NGOs, some are into education. They are into various social interventions. So depending on the nature of the case, then we fall on whichever we think can help us.
Rebecca has been with the police service for 21 years, yet her living condition leaves much to be desired. Beneath her smile is a lot of uncertainty for the future of her quadruplets. But perhaps it's time for her to smile, and she would, once she receives the intended help. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, GH1 News.
All right, it's good to know that the
at
social
least some
welfare
support is coming for. I know it's a very controversial subject, whether or not, you know, when you have working parents who typically can afford to pay for education and things like that for their kids, and whether or not the state should be intervening. But I think this is one of those cases that the state should intervene, you know, and
they have.
Well, they have, which is something good that we should commend them for. Time now to do business. Go to me. What do you have in business brief?
All right, just before I tell you, it's always a situation I say television gets results. So, of course, this police officer would get help, and I'm sure society would also push in and support these young ones. If they become better for Ghana. But tonight, interesting details coming up. Would you believe it if I tell you that the Deputy Finance Minister, Kweku Kwarteng, was booed at the Tema Port this afternoon because the paperless system is seemingly failing a lot of freight forward as well.
We were talking about that yesterday, that anytime there is technology in this country that has to do anything, for some strange reason, it shuts down.
And you can't just understand.
Well, these people have not been trained, and I'm sure per the work they were doing at the ports before the system came in, they didn't need to use computers.
No, we have seen that for education as well, right? Where software has been deployed. And
another website even had to be created.
Exactly.
Go see one at Smith also.
Let's see what you have in that.
All right, but we'll keep that story and bring it to you later. In our very first story this evening, we would want to tell you about how the finance minister is not too happy with the Treasury single account, as letters that are written out, people are failing to respond to it. So the commercial banks, be warned. When we come back, I'll give you the details. All right, so Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has warned of possible sanctions on financial institutions who fail to comply with the directive of creating a single treasury account to enable government monitor its funds deposited in commercial banks. Well, according to him, some commercial banks and institutions have failed not to respond to letters requesting for information on government's funds deposited with them. The Treasury Single Account provides a unified structure of government's bank accounts which enables the consolidation and optimum utilization of government's cash resources. The TSA is therefore meant to provide government with a consolidated view of its cash resources and to ensure efficient treasury management as required under the Cash Management Reform Initiative. Speaking at a stakeholders consultation meeting ahead of the 2018-2021 budget, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta said although a good initiative, financial institutions were yet to comply.
There's at least about 4 to 5 billion of resources that could be in the TSA. And once that is done, then our need to come to the market for 1 billion cedis or so every week becomes a thing of the past. And once we don't come to the market, interest rates also go down and the banks will be able to lend at a better rate.
When questioned on measures government would adopt to ensure compliance to this directive, Ken Ofori-Atta said his outfit would not hesitate to apply sanctions on any institution that does not comply.
I think they are slow in responding because we have not invoked sanctions. And I'm going to look at the response so far. Some banks have fully responded, and we should be able to put that out. And so once maybe a sanctions regime is triggered, we might see a different reaction.
AGI Vice President Humphrey Ayim Dake told the Business Brief government's continuous borrowing from the domestic market had a tendency of driving interest rates high, hence the need to push for the Treasury single account.
If government could implement this single treasury policy effectively, and most of the banks will make sure that they comply, it will reduce the government's cost of paying interest. invariably will reduce the policy rate because borrowing from government will go low. So this is part of the issues of 2017 that we expect that there'll be a lot of emphasis and compliance, and once it enters 2018 there'll be stability.
All right, so we take other stories at this point, and here the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders is calling for the establishment of a localized solution centers within the various ports in the country to help address the challenges being faced by importers and clearing agents following the deployment of the paperless systems of the Ghana's ports right from September 1. Now, the calls were made following complaints of delays at both the Takoradi and Tema ports.
Some agents and importers at the Takoradi and Tema ports said they were unhappy about the use of the new paperless system. At the time GH1 News got to the terminal, most agents and importers were lamenting about the breakdown of the system. According to them, port authorities failed to offer ample training to enable them go through the process with ease. Government deployed the paperless application system on September 1 to help reduce the undue delays and human interference in the clearance of goods at the various ports. But the shipping agents tell GH1 News the system is fraught with several challenges.
All right, so if the news breaks, you can trust that GH1 TV would bring it to you. Well, we're done with business, but we're not done with the bulletin. The best is yet to come. Over to you, Patrick and Abena.
Kweko, you see, it's very interesting. Were these people not consulted, you know, prior to the deployment of the system? I mean, I know there's been a lot of conversations around
Absolutely.
this. So why are they protesting? I mean,
all right, so